What happens when the world's most underestimated nation decides it's done playing by someone else's rules? This is not just a story, it's a reckoning. Burkina Faso, a country dismissed by headlines as poor, unstable, and dependent, is now making the world pause. Not because of war or crisis, but because of something no one expected: a Tesla Gigafactory. And at the center of it all, a man the world wrote off as just another soldier, Ibrahim Traoré. Today, I'll take you inside one of the most extraordinary power shifts unfolding in modern Africa, a story of vision, quiet defiance, and what happens when you stop asking for permission. It all came to a head in a Berlin boardroom. The air was tense, the stakes enormous. Across the table from the African delegation sat a European investor, relaxed in his tailored suit, basking in smug certainty. "Burkina Faso can't even keep the lights on for 24 hours, he chuckled, glancing around the room. "And you think you're ready to build the Tesla plant? Do you even understand the infrastructure that requires?" Laughter flickered across the faces of his colleagues. Another delusional African dream, they thought. Another fantasy doomed to fail. But Ibrahim Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't even blink. Instead, he reached into a worn leather briefcase and placed a single manila folder on the table. He slid it forward. "Before we continue, you may want to see what we've already built," he said quietly. One of the Tesla executives, silent until now, opened the folder. Her eyes narrowed as she read, then widened. She passed it on, page by page. Soon the laughter stopped. Glances were exchanged. Postures shifted. Even the smirking investor grew pale, his confidence draining as each page revealed something he hadn't expected: real infrastructure, real numbers, real momentum. What was in that folder didn't just silence the room, it changed everything. But to understand how Burkina Faso got to this moment, we have to go back 6 months, before Berlin, before the briefcase, before the world took notice. Inside the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, the lights flickered with another power cut. On his desk, he stared at a pile of rejection letters, one after another from global development banks, each citing political instability or lack of collateral. Across from him sat Aminata Diou, his closest advisor. She had been his economics professor once. Now she was his strategist. "They'll never fund us," Traoré said, closing the folder. "Not until we prove we don't need them." She leaned forward. "Then what's the plan?" He stood, walking to a large map of Burkina Faso on the wall. "We've been asking for loans to build a broken system. But what if we didn't need to catch up because we could leap ahead?" His finger traced across vast open plains, sun-drenched, untapped. No legacy grids, no old pipelines, just raw space and sunlight. We can build something new, from zero. He turned back to her, eyes sharp with conviction. "They think our weakness is poverty, but our strength is the fact that we have nothing to lose." What happened next would set off a chain reaction of bold moves, unlikely partnerships, and a blueprint that might just shift the balance of power between continents. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this story, you may find yourself rethinking not just Africa's future, but your own. "What resources?" Aminata asked, skeptical. "We barely have enough foreign reserves to import fuel for 3 months." Traoré's eyes didn't waver. "We don't need to import what we can produce ourselves. We have 3 things the world is desperate for: sun, land, and lithium. He walked to his desk and retrieved another folder, this one thicker, heavier. Inside were geological surveys, quietly commissioned by his administration without fanfare or media leaks. He laid them out in front of her. The world economy is shifting. EVs, solar, batteries. The West needs energy independence, and for that they need lithium. But here's the twist. Some of Africa's largest untapped reserves sit beneath our feet. Aminata scanned the documents, her eyes growing wide. These readings, if these are accurate, foreign mining giants would already be— They don't know, Traoré cut in. The previous government hid these reports, planning to sell the rights for pennies once the price was high enough. He looked her dead in the eye. But we're not selling. Then what are we doing with it? She asked, though her tone had already shifted, curiosity overtaking doubt. First, energy independence, Traoré said. Then something much larger. He hesitated, then finally said it aloud, the idea that had been growing in silence. We're going to build Africa's first gigafactory. A battery gigafactory? Aminata asked. Ibrahim, that's impossible, he finished. That's what they said about Rwanda becoming a tech hub, about Kenya leading the world in mobile payments, about Morocco building one of the fastest trains on the continent. He leaned in, his voice low but resolute. We will never be respected until we produce what we consume. That starts now. In the weeks that followed, Traoré formed a covert task force, hand-picked, highly skilled, and bound not by politics but purpose. No bureaucrats, no photo ops, just minds that could execute. The group was diverse. Professors from the University of Ouagadougou, fresh engineering graduates, farmers who knew the terrain better than any satellite, even soldiers trained in logistics and infrastructure security. They called themselves the Silence, a name born from two truths. Their mission demanded secrecy, and the world had already written them off. Their task? Design a self-powered gigafactory, one that could produce solar panels and the batteries to store that energy, independent of foreign grids, foreign aid, and foreign permission. Their first meeting was held in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Ouagadougou, lit by makeshift lamps and powered by the very solar batteries they hoped to scale. No notes, no public records, nothing leaves this room until we're ready, Traoré told them. One young engineer raised her hand. With respect, sir, why hide something we should be proud of? Because pride comes after results, Traoré said calmly. The moment we go public, we'll face resistance from the corporations who profit off our dependency and the governments who want us silent and extractable. We need to be too far along for them to stop us. Weeks passed. The team worked through blackouts, storms, and doubt. On one rain-soaked night, the roof shook from thunder, but no one stopped. A prototype battery lit the room. Laptops hummed with simulations. Engineers sketched solar grid maps. Technicians tested soil for foundation integrity. Then, one voice cracked the silence. What if Tesla never replies? Asked Fatima, a materials specialist. What if they laugh at us? The question hung in the air. Traoré stepped forward. They will, he said, until they can't. He let the silence settle, then continued. Whether Tesla joins us or not, we move. If they say no, we build smaller, learn, iterate, scale. The future of Burkina Faso will never again hinge on foreign approval. Many nodded. Some still hesitated. He understood. This isn't just a factory, he told them. This is proof that we don't just extract, we build. That we're not just labor, we're leaders. and that Africa doesn't need saving, it needs space to rise. 3 weeks later, after dozens of revisions and sleepless nights, Traoré drafted a message, not to a PR inbox or corporate contact form, but directly to Elon Musk. He had quietly cultivated the right back channel. He wasn't begging. This wasn't charity. There was no fluff, just hard data. Satellite maps of Burkina Faso's unmatched solar exposure. Confidential geological surveys confirming the lithium deposits. Detailed talent bios from the silence, highlighting their ability to innovate under resource constraints. The project had a name now, Volta Rebirth, honoring the river that gave life to the region and the scientist who gave life to the battery. He ended the message with a single, unshakable sentence. If you say no, someone else will say yes. Then they waited. Days passed, then weeks. No response. Morale dipped. The work continued, but hope thinned. And then, on the 23rd day, Traoré received a reply. Not from Musk himself, but from Tesla's Vice President of International Operations. The message was simple. Your data is compelling. We're interested. Can you host a delegation next month? The silence shattered into cautious celebration when Traoré shared the news. No, it wasn't a deal, but it was something no one thought possible. Tesla was listening. We have 1 month, Traoré told them as the cheers faded. 1 month to build something they can't walk away from. What followed was the most intense period of work the team had ever faced. The silence split into 3 focused units. The first, deploy a fully operational mini-grid in a remote village, solar-powered, battery-backed, and entirely off-grid. The second, refine their battery prototype to inch closer to Tesla's efficiency standards. The third, finalize a complete architectural and logistical blueprint for the Gigafactory, everything from water usage to workforce housing to raw material supply chains. They worked day and night, driven by purpose, patriotism, and the unshakable belief that what they were building could reshape Africa's place in the global tech economy. Obstacles came quickly, technical setbacks, material shortages, moments of near collapse, but they pushed forward, adapting, improvising, and building anyway. When the Tesla delegation arrived, led by the same vice president who had responded to Traoré's message, they expected hopeful talk and PowerPoint slides. What they found instead stunned them. A fully functioning solar grid lighting up a village that had never known reliable electricity. A battery prototype, rough around the edges, but efficient, stable, and developed entirely with local resources. The delegation spent 3 full days in Burkina Faso. They toured installations, grilled engineers, met with farmers who helped install the panels, and sat down with Traoré to hear his broader vision. On the last day, the VP didn't make promises, but she said just enough to reignite the team's hope. We'll take this to headquarters. What you've built here is remarkable. 2 days later, a second message arrived. Formal this time. Tesla was officially interested in exploring a potential partnership. But there was a catch. They wanted to convene with key stakeholders, technical leads, policy experts, and most critically, major investors. The meeting would take place in Berlin in 3 months. Traoré understood the stakes. The engineers had impressed the tech team, but financiers would be harder to move. Mini-grids and prototypes weren't enough. They needed hard economics, undeniable scalability, and proof that this wasn't a dream, it was a business. The next 3 months pushed the silence to their limits. They expanded the solar mini-grid to 3 more villages. Their battery design improved, now reaching 91% of Tesla's benchmark efficiency. Most importantly, they developed a full economic roadmap, a 5-year projection showing how the Gigafactory could become profitable and scalable. When it was time to go to Berlin, Traoré selected 4 delegates: Aminata, for her economic brilliance; Musa, the young engineer who had helped power the first village; and 2 other core members of the Silence, experts in system design and logistics. They trained relentlessly for weeks, anticipating every challenge, every question. What they couldn't prepare for was the arrogance they'd encounter. The Berlin boardroom was designed to intimidate. Glass walls, marble floors, silent attendants, and sleek furniture more expensive than the average Burkina Faso annual salary. 3 Tesla VPs were present, including the one who had visited Burkina Faso. They were respectful, attentive, cautiously curious. But the European investors, invited to assess the financial viability, were openly dismissive. Traoré delivered his opening presentation with clarity and conviction. Silence followed. Then the same investor who had once laughed in their earlier meeting leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Burkina Faso can't even power its cities," he said. "And now you want to build a factory? Do you even grasp the scale of what you're proposing?" He wasn't joking. He was reasserting a worldview, one where Africa remained a resource to be exploited, not a leader to be taken seriously. Traoré said nothing. Instead, he slid a thick folder onto the center of the table. Inside, photos of the 4 now electrified villages, running day and night on solar and battery power alone. Technical specifications of the locally built battery, operating within 9% of Tesla's own standard. Aerial shots of cleared land, where workers had already begun building solar arrays. Real construction, not computer renderings. As the folder moved from hand to hand, the tone of the room began to shift. The Tesla VP, who had seen it all in person, offered a subtle nod. Even she seemed surprised by the scale of progress. One of her colleagues looked up. "Who built this?" Traoré's voice was calm. "Students, soldiers, farmers. People you'd pass by without a second glance. We're not waiting for change, we're building it." The skeptical investor flipped to the financial projections. He frowned, scanning the figures. "These labor costs, these can't be real." "They are, because we're not extracting profits to send overseas. We're building value here, with hands and minds that believe in the outcome." And for the first time that day, the investor didn't laugh. Aminata leaned forward, her tone calm but firm. "And our long-term energy costs approach 0 once the solar infrastructure is installed. What we lack in legacy systems, we make up for in innovation and efficiency." "But the political risk," one investor interjected. "It's already factored into our contingency models." And I would argue this: when a country takes control of its own industrial development, it becomes more stable than one reliant on foreign aid or raw material extraction. The next 3 hours unfolded as a gauntlet of technical scrutiny: supply chains, quality assurance, water sourcing, environmental safeguards. The Burkina Faso team met each question head-on. They spoke with precision, confidence, and clarity, each member deferring to one another's expertise when needed, but never flustered, never caught off guard. By the end, the mood in the room had transformed. The laughter was gone. What remained was interest, real, tangible interest. The skeptics were now leaning in, asking about financing models and timelines, instead of ridiculing feasibility. As the meeting concluded and the team packed up their materials, the Tesla VP who had visited Ouagadougou approached Traoré. "Why didn't you show this level of detail in your initial proposal?" she asked quietly. Traoré gave her a steady look. Would you have believed it if I had? She paused, then nodded. Fair point. We'll be in touch within the week. Back in Ouagadougou, the Silence team gathered inside their warehouse headquarters, buzzing with anticipation as Traoré walked in. They didn't say yes, but they didn't say no. Some shoulders slumped. Moussa stepped forward. So, what now? Traoré didn't hesitate. We keep building, with or without Tesla, with or without European money. We've already proven we can build working systems. Now we scale. 2 days later, as the team worked to expand their battery production, Traoré's phone lit up with a secure notification, an encrypted message, Tesla HQ. It was short and direct. Elon Musk wants to speak. Tomorrow. The call when it came was just as direct as the man himself. Your team is impressive, but let's be real, I'm concerned about the political situation. That's valid, Traoré replied. But consider this. A gigafactory means jobs, reliable energy, and national investment in the outcome. That's how you create stability, not by waiting for it, but by building it. Musk was silent for a moment. Then, fair. Next question. How do you guarantee protection of intellectual property? We're not asking for your most sensitive tech. This is a partnership. We provide land, labor, resources, and political alignment. You bring technical expertise and supply chain access. We both rise, or we both miss the future. The conversation stretched nearly an hour. They discussed everything: technical specs, infrastructure, shared risks, sustainability. Musk challenged him on several points, but never tuned out. He listened. When the call ended, there were no promises, only a final word from Musk. I'll take it to my team. What followed were 3 days of silence. The Silence team returned to work, expanding their rural energy networks, refining battery units, running simulations, but the air was heavy with tension. Even Traoré, usually calm and unreadable, found himself glancing at his phone more than usual. And then it happened. 3:47 a.m. Ouagadougou time. Elon Musk posted on X, friendly Twitter, Africa's future is built by its people. Tesla will partner with Burkina Faso to pilot the Volta Rebirth Factory, the first of its kind on the continent. Energy innovation doesn't belong to one nation or one company. It belongs to humanity. The internet exploded. Within hours, international headlines were trying to catch up. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Why Burkina Faso? What is the Volta Rebirth Project? Financial analysts called it a high-risk moonshot. The French energy lobby, with deep fossil fuel interests in West Africa, called the project dangerous and destabilizing to regional energy security. But behind closed doors, the story was different. The same European investor who once laughed at Traoré and Berlin never said a word publicly. But within a week, his firm quietly reached out to request a meeting. Because now they believed. What do you think of this bold vision so far? Can one underestimated nation rewrite the future of energy in Africa? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what happens next is nothing short of historic. 3 months after Elon Musk's viral announcement, construction officially began on the Volta Rebirth Factory. The site, a 500-acre stretch of sun-scorched land 15 kilometers outside Ouagadougou. Close enough to the capital for infrastructure, far enough to grow without limits. There was no red carpet, no pop stars, no spectacle, just Traoré. Wearing a plain work shirt, he arrived with the Silence team and dozens of newly trained laborers from nearby villages. Men and women who had once farmed this land, now preparing to help reshape its future. A few international journalists had managed to secure invitations. Reuters, Bloomberg, and some of Africa's leading news outlets. They watched as Traoré picked up a shovel and turned the first mound of earth alongside the workers. No speech, just action. Later, a Western reporter pulled him aside. "Mr. Traoré, critics say this project is symbolic, more political theater than practical infrastructure. How do you respond?" Traoré gestured to the machinery already being wired to solar-powered generators. "Does this look symbolic to you? In 6 months, this site will generate power. In 18, it will produce batteries. Judge us by what we build, not by what people say." Another journalist asked, "But why here? Why now? Burkina Faso isn't exactly known for technology." Traoré gave a small smile. "Because they said it was impossible, and because our children deserve better than to inherit our limitations." Construction began, and with it, a decision that surprised international observers. The workforce would be almost entirely local. Tesla sent engineers and advisors, but the hard labor, the wiring, the welding, the coding, the logistics, that belonged to Burkina Faso. "They won't know how to build a Gigafactory," one Tesla advisor warned. "They didn't either, until someone trained them. The difference isn't ability, it's opportunity." The silence expanded into a full-fledged training corps. They built accelerated learning modules in French, local dialects, even visual-based lessons for those who couldn't read. From basic solar installs to battery chemistry, villagers became technicians, coders, builders, faster than anyone thought possible. There were setbacks, delayed shipments, flash floods that drowned equipment and paused work for weeks. Critics pounced. Each time, Traoré and his team found a way forward. When parts didn't arrive, they built temporary versions. When rain stopped work, they turned to training. When critics scoffed, they answered with progress. And 6 months in, on schedule, the solar field lit up. Not just the construction site, but neighboring communities too. Villages that had once gone dark after sunset now glowed quietly into the night. It was the first visible proof that Volta rebirth was real, and support swelled across the region. Investors who had scoffed began to circle back. Traoré's office was flooded with proposals. Aminata, now overseeing investor relations, dropped a stack of them on his desk. "Even the ones who laughed at us in Berlin," she said. Traoré flipped through the pages. "Keep the doors open to those who believed early. The rest we'll consider after Phase 1. "That's in 9 months, Aminata pointed out. "The extra capital could help." "It could," Traoré said. "But sometimes what you don't accept is just as important as what you do." 9 months into construction, Elon Musk himself visited the site. He walked the factory floor, talked with trainees, listened to the silence present their data. "I've seen gigafactories on 3 continents, but this is different. You're not just building batteries, you're building a story the world didn't think Africa could tell." That quote alone set off another media storm. Suddenly, outlets that had ignored Burkina Faso for decades were doing specials. 60 Minutes, Le Monde, even The Economist ran a cover, "The African Engine, Burkina Faso and the Future of Energy." Inquiries doubled, investment offers surged, but Traoré held the line. Volta rebirth was never just about industry, it was about dignity. 1 year in, the Gigafactory stood proudly on the savannah. Its solar panels stretched across acres of once empty land. The first battery line had been installed. Dozens of Burkinabe engineers now led daily operations. 18 months after the groundbreaking, on time, the first battery cells rolled off the line. They weren't world beaters, not yet, but they were African-made, with African hands, from African lithium, using African sun. The first shipment powered a fleet of electric buses built in Rwanda. Those buses now operate in Ouagadougou, replacing diesel exhaust with clean air and quiet efficiency. Reactions were mixed. Some called it a turning point. Others dismissed it as a PR stunt that wouldn't scale. Traoré paid them no mind. He was already working on Phase 2, expanding production and branching into EV components. 2 years after breaking ground, the factory was operating at 60% capacity. Battery output was growing monthly. And then, one afternoon, a familiar face arrived at Traoré's office, the European investor who had laughed in Berlin. He looked different now, quieter, paler, no entourage, no arrogance. "I was wrong," he said, standing alone in the modest office. "I misjudged you. I came to apologize and to offer an investment proposal." Traoré let the silence hang before replying. "We're not short on capital anymore, but we are short on partners who believed before the cameras arrived." Traoré listened without a word as the investor laid out a surprisingly generous proposal, better terms than he'd ever offered similar ventures elsewhere. When he finally finished, Traoré leaned forward. "Your offer is impressive, but tell me, what changed your mind?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "The results," he said. "You achieved in 2 years what experts said would take 10, if it happened at all." Traoré nodded. "Return tomorrow. Bring your full team. Then we'll talk specifics." After the investor left, Traoré summoned Aminata and handed her the proposal. She scanned the document carefully. "The terms are strong," she admitted, "but after the way he dismissed us in Berlin." Traoré shook his head. "This isn't about him. It's about momentum. If one of Europe's most risk-averse investors is backing us, others will follow. And every new investor makes the next one easier." The deal was signed the next day, with one clause added by Traoré. A portion of all returns would fund technical education programs in Burkina Faso. What would you have done in his place? Turned him away, or turned his capital into something greater? Let us know in the comments, because the story's just getting started. 3 years after that first shovel hit the soil, the Volta Rebirth Factory was fully operational. Where once stood dry, empty land outside Ouagadougou, now stood a state-of-the-art complex employing more than 3,000 people directly and supporting thousands more across supply chains. Burkina Faso's economy transformed. GDP growth jumped from a stagnant 3% to a dynamic 7.5%. Foreign direct investment quadrupled, and for the first time in generations, rolling blackouts became a thing of the past. Other African nations took notice. Delegations from Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, and Nigeria toured the facility. They asked questions, took notes, and studied every phase of the project. Traoré welcomed them all. "This model doesn't belong to us," he said. "It belongs to Africa. Take what works, change what doesn't, and make it your own." Suddenly, the international media stopped referring to Burkina Faso as unstable. Now it was a case study in innovation. A Harvard Business Review cover read, "The nation that rewired the narrative." Young Burkinabe began returning home. Opportunities that once seemed like fantasy were now within reach. One evening, Traoré stood atop the main production building with Moussa, the young engineer who once feared Tesla might laugh at them. Now, Moussa was the facility's technical director. "Did you ever doubt?" Musa asked, as the LED lights below flickered on, powered by batteries they built themselves. Traoré replied, "I doubted the timing, and I doubted whether people would rise to the moment. But I never doubted we could build something meaningful if we stopped accepting the limitations placed on us by others." Musa smiled. "The press calls it a miracle." Traoré shook his head. "There's nothing miraculous about hard work, discipline, and belief in your people." 5 years after groundbreaking, Tesla and Burkina Faso announced Phase 2, an electric vehicle assembly plant. It would be built next to the Gigafactory, designed for African terrain, priced for African families. At the launch event, Elon Musk stood beside Traoré. "5 years ago," Musk said to a cheering crowd, "Ibrahim sent me a message that ended with, 'If you say no, someone else will say yes.' I'm glad we said yes." The applause was thunderous. Later, away from the cameras, Musk asked a quieter question. "Why us? You could have pitched other companies, ones more used to working in emerging markets." Traoré looked him in the eye. "Because you're known for doing the impossible, and we needed someone who wouldn't be constrained by what others think Africa can't do." But the Volta Rebirth Factory had become more than a business success. It was a symbol, a visible declaration that African nations could lead, not follow. Students across the continent began studying engineering, chemistry, robotics, not to work abroad, but to build homegrown industries. Enrollment in technical institutes surged. The Silence team, now operating publicly, launched a national innovation center focused on clean energy and agriculture. Their next project? Solar-powered food processing hubs that helped farmers preserve harvests and earn more without middlemen or exports. Even the World Bank, the same institution that once rejected Burkina Faso's loan request, published a case study titled Volta Rebirth, a new model for African industrialization. 7 years in, as the factory produced its millionth battery pack, a journalist asked Traoré a familiar question. Why here? Why now? His answer was simple. Because the old development models didn't work. Because we had to create our own future. And because sometimes the most powerful response to doubt isn't argument, it's results. And what of the investor who laughed in Berlin? He never publicly apologized, but his firm became one of the largest beneficiaries of the project's success. And he quietly told his partners, never underestimate what Africa can do again. As for Ibrahim Traoré, he remained unchanged, still modest, still focused, still driven by progress, not praise. He became a reluctant icon from Dakar to Nairobi. Young African founders cited him as inspiration. Policymakers sought his advice. Foreign investors listened closely when he spoke. And still, his message remained the same. Don't tell me what Africa can't do. Show me what you're building. The Volta Rebirth Factory became more than a facility. It became a monument to resilience, to vision, to a continent no longer waiting for permission. They had called him just a soldier. They had called Burkina Faso a poor, unstable country. But when the world doubted him, Traoré didn't argue. He built. So let me ask you, if the world doubted your worth, would you argue, or would you build something they couldn't ignore? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, like and share it, because sometimes silence speaks louder than applause. Subscribe for more stories of underdogs rewriting the rules. And let us know, what forgotten place, what overlooked people do you believe in? Your story might be next.